Welcome to the 36th Annual Humanities Day at the University of Chicago. I'm Martha Roth. I am the Dean of the Division of the Humanities, and it is my great pleasure to welcome all of you here today, those of you in attendance here in Mandel Hall, and those who will watch this keynote address online. Looking out now at this audience, I see many constituencies, faculty members, current students from the college and the graduate divisions, alumni, friends of the university. All of you recognize the value of the humanities in our daily lives, and it is that recognition that leads to your support, so critical to the continued success of the faculty and students in the humanities division at the University of Chicago. I urge all of you to take advantage of the opportunities presented today and take in as much as you possibly can, whether your interests are piqued by the arts, literature, philosophy, linguistics, history, or any of the other disciplines represented here today. The theme of the day is Come with Ideas. I know you will also leave with ideas. Take the ideas home with you, think deeply about the questions, the issues, and the problems presented today, and I'm confident that once again you will find Humanities Day a rich and fulfilling experience that will continue to inflect your perspective even after you leave our campus. The centerpiece of Humanities Day is always the keynote address, delivered to the entire assembled community. Before introducing this year's speaker, I want to whet your appetite for next year. I'm pleased to announce that next year's speaker will be David Levine, the Addie Clark Harding Professor in Germanic Studies and Theater and Performance Studies, and the director of the Richard and Mary L. Gray Center for Arts and Inquiry. While David still has a full year to develop his talk, and I don't want to tie him down, he now tells me that as a moment he plans to explore how the arts and the role of the arts can be reconceptualized at a great research university, and more specifically, the ways that art and the artists who create art impact and inflect scholarship across the disciplines. These questions are crucial in David's teaching. Right now, for example, he is teaching an experimental course offered and cross-listed not only in David's home department of Germanic Studies, but also in music, theater program, and the Divinity School. Some of you might be fortunate enough to learn more about this particular project in a presentation he is delivering later this afternoon. Regardless whether or not you are able to attend his session today, please mark your calendars now for Saturday, October 17th, 2015, for the keynote address by David Levine. It is now my pleasure to present today's keynote speaker, Lenore Grenoble, the John Matthews Manley Distinguished Service Professor in the Department of Linguistics and the college. Lenore received her bachelor's degree from Cornell University and both her master's and PhD from the University of California, Berkeley, and conducted research and received additional training at Moscow State University, Leningrad State University, and Belgrade University. Prior to coming to the University of Chicago in 2007, Lenore taught at Berkeley, Harvard, and Dartmouth. An internationally respected expert on endangered languages, she is the author of numerous books and articles, most notably Saving Languages, An Introduction to Language Revitalization, 2006, and Language Policy in the Former Soviet Union, 2003. She is the editor or co-editor of volumes on language documentation and endangered languages, and co-editor of a linguistic book series for our own University of Chicago Press. Lenore is the recipient of numerous grants from such competitive and prestigious organizations as the National Science Foundation, the American Council of Learned Societies, and the Endangered Language Documentation Program. Lenore's recent investigations of endangered languages have taken her all over the world. She's done fieldwork with the Maori in New Zealand, the Evenki in Siberia, and the Wolof in Senegal to study some of the issues and around lesser studied and most endangered languages still being spoken today. It is estimated that there are now some 6,000 to 7,000 languages spoken in the world, and ethno-linguists estimate that between 40 and 90% of them, 3,000 to 6,000 languages, are currently endangered, at risk of disappearing, along with their communities, their humor, their cuisine, their identities, before the end of this century. And the pace of extinction is accelerating as the world becomes more global, as the internet dominates, pushing aside the less commonly spoken languages of smaller communities and marginalizing and ultimately obliterating unique, rich, and living cultural expressions. Although Lenore is rightfully applauded for her scores of scholarly books, articles, and documentation of endangered languages, she is also recognized for her language activism. Not content with simply studying the effects of language endangerment, Lenore Grenoble is deeply engaged with the work of language revitalization. Her projects in Siberia and Greenland include developing materials such as textbooks, workbooks, and dictionaries to assist community members in passing on their native languages to future generations. Lenore is currently the project coordinator of the Arctic Council's Indigenous Language Vitality Initiative, for example. This particular endeavor, driven first by the region's indigenous residents, deploys academics, scientists, policymakers, and interested parties to monitor and promote indigenous languages of the Arctic. Her collaborations with policymakers and indigenous communities demonstrate Lenore's true value as a scholar and activist for endangered languages. The title of today's address, Languages in Danger, Why Should We Care?, is a call to action. Lenore will draw on her decades of experience to show the cascading effects of losing a language forever, the consequences of language endangerment, and the importance of language revitalization and language documentation present a critical issue with global impacts for culture, society, and linguistic identity. Please join me in welcoming to the podium a dedicated scholar and a tireless advocate for language preservation. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to present Lenore Grenoble.
Thank you, Martha, for that wonderful introduction. After that kind of introduction, it's hard to stand up here and say anything. I'd like to thank you all for coming here today, in a rainy day, to listen to something that I feel very passionate about. And before they go away, I'd like to thank the technical staff and planners who've been really helping me get this, my presentation up, in particular Carl Nash, who's behind the scenes in all of this, Tom Popelka, and Bob James, who's on the sound. Since I'm using some recordings from the field, the sound goes up and down sometimes, and it's not Bob's fault, it's mine. A little bit of a disclaimer, I am going to be talking about language loss and what we are doing about it. This is a complicated, complex issue. And Martha said, I can't talk to you all day. So I will be oversimplifying things greatly. And I'll go through some slides really quickly. And I can put slides up on my website for people who are interested in reading them again. I'm happy to do that. I'll take the video out because this is a huge presentation. But please keep in mind that I'm only touching highlights, and I'm focusing things in a certain way just to give you a picture and overview. The research that I'm working on in Greenland is funded by the National Science Foundation, and I want to thank them very much. The projects that we have in Greenland are supported by the Joint Committee, which is an international committee from Greenland, Denmark, and the US. So we're supported at a high level. But above and all, first and foremost, and at the end of the day, I'm supported by the Humanities division here. I could not do the work without their support. I will be talking about this initiative a little bit that Martha mentioned, and it is funded deeply and broadly throughout the world, but Sami Council of Sweden, Government of Norway, and particular Aboriginal Affairs and Northern Development of Canada have paid quite a lot of money. It's part of the Sustainable Development Working Group of the Arctic Council. I'll talk about that a little bit just so you have the context for what's going on. Despite the fact that we are talking about endangered languages and language loss and language revitalization, the rhetoric among indigenous communities has shifted to one of vitality, sustainability, and resistance. And I hope that some of that emerges from the talk today. So I was thinking about how to frame things about why care, and the New York Times helped me. Front page, September 27th, there's an article on what's happening in Navajo country. Essentially, the rule is that if you're the president of the Navajo Nation, you need to be fluent in Navajo, and the guy who wants it isn't. This is not such old news, and I want to thank Lenore Grenoble for pointing out for me that this ran this week in The Guardian. What's going on with Navajo? The Navajo population, you can see, is about 266,000. It's the largest indigenous language left in North America, in the US. And there are 171,000 speakers. Of them, only 7,600 are monolinguals. And the language is going. For a long time, people thought that there were so many speakers that they wouldn't give up their language. Because the solution to all of this is not to have people speak just Navajo, really. The solution is to embrace multilingualism. And that's sort of the spoiler. I embrace multilingualism is my message today. So this is a very big current issue among many indigenous people, including the Navajo. So who cares? People all over the world care. And here's an Venki school that I've been in Siberia. You can see the sign here, says welcome in Russian, and then below it is written in Venki, welcome, Ikalu alacharaf, saying please welcome. And that school teaches the language, but one of the reasons that language is shifting is that it's being taught more in schools like this than in the home. So you already have issues going on with language. We do find Mayan language centers in Guatemala supporting 20 plus indigenous languages that are spoken there. There's very strong support for language maintenance and revitalization in Guatemala. So the short answer of who cares is it's the speaker communities themselves who care. And they're doing many things to bring it back. Probably the classic case of language revitalization is Hebrew. And it is not only the classic case, but the most successful. I had to put this picture up. Sam Boyd, I was on his dissertation committee, and he had a baby. And he sent it to me, coincidentally. He's reading Goodnight Moon in Hebrew to his son. And this is a sign of the vitality of Hebrew. He's in Boulder, Colorado while he's doing this. He's not in Israel. But he's reading Goodnight Moon. This is a sign of vitality. The language is used in new domains. When Hebrew was revitalized to be the language of Israel, Goodnight Moon was not written in Hebrew, right? But it's moving forward, and we see lots of people excited in using it. Hebrew is probably an exceptional case, however, for language revitalization. So just a little bit about this project that I want to, that Martha mentioned, actually, so I don't need to tell you much. The thing that's exciting about this project, it's called the Arctic Indigenous Languages Project, but some of the Sami people said, oh, we should have a better acronym. Let's call it ALIVE. So it's a little corny, but it works. Arctic Language Initiative, Vitality and Energy. And if you are interested, you can go to the website, arcticlanguages.com. What's interesting about this project is how big it is. The Arctic, and I'll keep coming back to the Arctic because that's where I do most of my work. The Arctic is arranged with the Arctic Council, which is an intergovernmental organization. And there are, as you can see, the eight Arctic nations are voting members. The chair rotates. The chair of the Arctic Council is with Canada right now. It will rotate in May and come to the US. John Kerry will chair this committee, so it's a very high-level intergovernmental body. And I just got a message this morning from a collaborator of mine who's a scientist who's in Washington right now, working with them as they're working toward the transition. He said there's a lot of excitement and interest in the Arctic. We'll talk about why. But we're mostly interested today in the permanent participants. In addition to the 8 voting members, there are 6 permanent participants. They have a seat at the table, and a seat at the table at the Arctic Council is very important because you have a voice. The permanent participants are these international indigenous organizations that you see here. Inuit, Sami, Gwich'in, Aleut at the Basque, and the Russian Association of Peoples of the North. They called the first ever meeting in 2008, the first ever that they called. So the Arctic Council meets all the time, quite regularly. The permanent participants have a right to call a meeting. The first one they did was in 2008 in Tromsø, Norway, to address issues of language revitalization. So if you think about all the issues going on in the Arctic with climate change, massive cultural change. The fact that they wanted to have a meeting about language shows that this is at the heart of the issue for them. So I've been working with them on bolstering their languages. So who cares? Speaker communities care very much. Language, culture, and identity are deeply intertwined. And you can't really take language out of the mix. It's a very important part of these. Linguists care too. Now, cynical people say to me, oh, you linguists just care about languages because you want something to study. The fact of the matter is that if we all spoke nothing but English, my colleagues and I would still have plenty to study. We would be very busy. And one of the reasons is because language, this pointer isn't helping, but you can read it. Because identity is a huge part of language. Think about this, and I would like you to do this for the rest of the day at least. Listen to how people are speaking. They are indexing different personalities, different identities as they speak. You can tell this when you speak to somebody on the phone. All the time we are doing this. When I step off of this podium, go home and talk to my dog, I'm going to use a different voice, right? If we all spoke English, we would quickly develop we would take those differences that are there, and they would become greater, because we need markers of identity. That's what people do. So this is really important for linguists, but we're going to take a little time out from this and just give you a big picture of what the world's languages look like so we have a common ground for talking about them. We'll just go over a number of languages, distribution, geographic distribution, and endangerment. So the numbers I'm using are from something called the Ethnologue. We all don't trust these numbers. We don't trust any numbers because what's a language really, right? Usually linguists will say, well, a language is when two dialects become so different that the speakers can't understand one another anymore. But if you think about it in Scandinavia, I'm taking the Norwegian class now. I'm taking the Norwegian class because I need to use Danish in Greenland. They're very, very similar. And Swedish is very similar to Norwegian. So Max Weinreich said, a language is a dialect with an army and a navy. So the difference between language and dialect has a lot to do with it. And if you think about it, it's absolutely true. You probably all think you speak English if you're sitting here and listening, right? But if you go to Liverpool, England, you may not be able to understand them. And I can't, and I'm a linguist. They think they're speaking English. So we have lots of different varieties. So we don't know what this number means. We also don't know because people self-declare what their language is. So if you ask me what languages I speak, I will tell you 2, because I dream in 2 languages. But I've studied a whole lot more. So anyways, here's the numbers you need to know. Just 8 languages are spoken by 40% of the world's population. A total of 8 of 6 to 7,000. That was a good ballpark. 18.7% of all those languages are spoken by 98.9% of the population. So we have a very uneven distribution between the numbers of speakers and the numbers of languages. So we have 82.3%, or if you want to do the math here, 5,776 languages spoken by 1.1% of the world. So we will lose, linguists say we're going to lose 50 to 90% of the languages. We argue about that. It doesn't really matter. A statistician at UNESCO took official census data from governments and figures that statistically we will lose at least 40%. So we know we're going to lose 40%. So I also thought I should talk a little bit about how we stack up here at the University of Chicago if I'm talking about languages. Actually, this year we are teaching 53 languages officially. I think we may be teaching more. That's what comes up in the official enrollment as language classes. We know, for example, in the linguistics department, we are teaching a class to train our students to go out and do field work like I do. The language we use, you get a consultant. We have an undergraduate, one of our undergraduate students, he's a Lesgi speaker. A Lesgian is the name of the language spoken in the Caucasus. That doesn't show up as being taught, but my students will spend 2 quarters working with me and Alan Yu to figure out the grammar of that language. So maybe it's 54. These numbers are always difficult. But we teach approximately a total of 90 different languages here. We as a faculty are deeply committed to languages. We believe they're important. They are windows to the world. We need them for our scholarship, and we believe that you need them to be better citizens. So this is a strength of the humanities, and it's an unusual strength. You can study languages here that you cannot study elsewhere. So the counting problem we already talked about. So here's the thing, top 10 languages in terms of speakers. This will surprise you. Mandarin, which is just one variety of things that people call Chinese. The Chinese dialects are not mutually intelligible. Mandarin tops with about 848 million speakers. Spanish now comes in second, if we believe these numbers, 414 million. English sees 335, and then there's some surprises, I think. So I think you're probably surprised to see Hindi is number 4. You probably aren't thinking much about Hindi. Bengali, number 7. You may be surprised to see Portuguese here as number 6. And you may be surprised to see Javanese. So what these numbers tell you and why we have so many speakers, 2 basic things. One is colonization patterns. Of course, the spread of English as a global language. We don't have what I would consider to be any reliable data on the number of people who speak English as a second language. We don't really know how to measure that. Does that mean you can get a cup of coffee in English? Or does that mean you can give this talk in English, right? We don't have a good measure for that. So this has a lot to do with colonization, and it also has to do with birth rates. There's nothing superior about Mandarin. There's nothing superior about English. It's the way they spread because of social reasons, and that's really important. So, and also it's kind of surprising that most places, there's some languages up here you don't see on the top 10. They're very high up, but there's some usual suspects you might be missing, like French and German. They're extremely important worldwide, but they just don't make the top 10. That's more because of birth rates and the colonization. Portuguese is spoken, there are many more Portuguese speakers in Brazil than in Portugal. So that's what the world looks like. And then I thought you should see this too, because the distribution, here's the ethnologue if you want the link to look at those numbers. As I said, they're problematic. Take everything with a grain of salt, but I don't know why that's up there. But you'll see that Europe has 4% of the world's languages. So we think about Europe as a language center, and we get Africa, 30%. So the languages are not distributed evenly across populations or geographically, just so you know. So we're going to talk about why we lose languages a little bit, and I want to give you a picture of the Arctic, because we're going to keep going back there, since that's where I work, and I thought I should talk about something I know. Sometimes a good idea. This is my view of the world. So here's the North Pole. This is the Arctic Circle. Here's Greenland. If you're having a hard time orienting yourself on this map, some people aren't. This is Siberia over here. This is Russia. Here is Scandinavia. And the colors here map out for different language families. So the Arctic is not very densely populated. There's about 4 million people there. 500,000 of them are indigenous peoples. So I'm working with 2 major groups of people in the Arctic, the Inuit Yupik Aleut, and they started over here historically. Getting funny back feet. Historically, they started over here in Siberia and moved from Alaska to Canada to Greenland. The languages in Siberia are nearly moribund. There are very few speakers. There's a robust community of Yupik speakers in Alaska, but the Inuit language there, Inupiaq, is highly endangered. Inuktitut is spoken over here, and it is shifting. The speakers are shifting to English right now. And in Greenland, Kalaallisut, the language I study, is robust. It is the only Arctic indigenous language that is not being lost. The other place I work is over here in Siberia. Evenki are a Tungusic people. That entire language family is being lost. The only Tungusic language you've heard of, if you're not a linguist, is Manchu. Manchu is highly endangered, nearly extinct. We have here, the yellow languages are Finno-Ugric. When you were coming in, that was Sami, and we're going to come back and talk about that yoik at the end. So one thing I just want you to also pay attention to as you look at the Arctic, what's happening here is that the sea ice is melting at an unprecedented rate. We're having the record lows since 1979 have been over the last decade. And if you look, where the whole northern passage is opening up, go home and look at a map that gives you country names that you can see. A huge part of that coast is Russia. So we have major security issues going on in the Arctic and a lot of indigenous people working there. So that's really the big picture of why this is important to think about these people. So just a little story. I'm not going to be able to go through all the reasons that we lose languages, and you've got some of them, but I thought I would tell you a little bit about my Evenki colleagues. So this is a picture in Moscow. You can see, it's a cheesy shot. There's a big craft fair, and Evenki are historically nomadic reindeer herders. They tell me, it's probably true, that they invented reindeer saddles so they ride reindeer. You can see they're not tall people. And my friend and colleague is in this group, and she grew up, she was born in Siberia in the middle of the taiga, and had a little cradle on the back of a reindeer. That's how she went out, and she and her siblings all spoke Evenki as children. They married, some of them married Evenki. She married a Russian. She's a linguist, so she actually still speaks Evenki. She moved to Leningrad, as the city was named then. Her son doesn't speak any Evenki. She moved to the city. Of her siblings, they had children. All of those children, there's only one who speaks Evenki. He continues to be a reindeer herder. So this kind of shift that we have over generations is very common, and it was fueled also by a boarding school system. She was forcibly taken from her family and put into a boarding school where different groups were mixed up and they were forced to speak Russian. They were punished for not speaking Russian. And so many people stopped speaking their language. Even if they didn't willfully do it, Russian was the lingua franca of the school, so they would go back home. I've met lots of people. They would go back home and they couldn't talk anymore except in Russian. This seems terrible, and it was certainly a terrible Soviet practice, but we did this in the US and in Canada. The Canadian government has made a public apology, which has meant a lot to people, but all over regions where people have been in boarding schools, this is Navajo, you'll hear them talk about trauma and the need for healing. On top of all of this, of course, we have social issues, that these endangered languages tend to be spoken by marginalized groups in society, and economic pressures. To get a good job in this country, you need to speak English, you speak Russian in Russia. So there's a whole lot of issues. It's really, really complicated, and I talk about indigenous peoples as if they were all thinking the same thing, but they aren't. They're different. So there's lots of different ideas there. So what do linguists care about? Now I want to get into this. For linguists, this is why we do this. Linguists care a lot about structures in languages and the range of possibilities in human language. And linguists do this funny thing that would drive some people nuts. We tend to take the language out of society and we look at it as language. So I'll probably start doing this like, oh, that's a great language. And linguists love verbs. You know, we really get excited about verbs. And so that makes us a little different than some people. Some linguists care very much about language in the brain, and language is a good window into the brain. If you're just looking at English, you just don't know the range of possibilities. And language tells us a lot about culture and a lot about society. So in particular, field linguists think about these things, and now one of the things that's happening is we have so much better computing capacity that different groups are trying to get the data from different linguists to see what we've got and see how things map out. But basically, we believe that the generalizations that we have about language are going to depend on the kind of data that we have, and we need to know what the range is like. We certainly don't know the full range. We've already lost many languages without any record. At least half of the world's languages don't have any written form. So when there's no speakers, we just don't know, unless we do what I tried to do, which is go out, record them, describe them, document them fully, so that when we don't have speakers, at least we'll have a good record, a written record, an audio record, and a visual record. And if you're paying any attention to the interpreter, she's using her hands in a very particular way, but I'm gesturing a lot too, right? You would want to know how that all comes together. So we need all of that. So one thing we like to know is about the history of peoples. And I thought I would start with this example because this is a language we teach here at the University of Chicago. And Basque is a language that has captured the imagination of many, many people. There's about 700,000 speakers today. They're all bilingual in Spanish and French. According to UNESCO's Atlas of World Languages in Danger, it's a vulnerable language. UNESCO, for some reason, pulled the atlas. It's not on the web right now. It hasn't been there for about a week. Basque was in steady decline until a big revitalization movement in Spain that's resulted in a lot more speakers in Spain. In France, it's still very endangered. And so you can see, here's a little map of the languages of Europe, and what we're interested in is Basque right here, between France and Spain. One of the reasons that people are interested in Basque is it is not related to any other language in Europe. It's what we call an isolate. And these languages are extremely interesting because we don't think that Martians fell down from the sky or came in rockets and started speaking Basque. We know that it must be related to something else, but we've lost those written records. So trying to figure out what Basque is related to requires a lot of deep historical linguistic work. The only speakers we have left of the language are the Basque or the related languages. So we're very, very interested in this. And because I don't know why, Carlos and I have talked about this, I don't know why people have so many wacko ideas about Basque, and I only put some of them, but people want it to be related to something. So, for example, they want it to be related to Ainu, which is over in Japan. That's a huge way to move, right? That's a lot of territory. That doesn't make a lot of sense. There's a lot of theories that they're related to the Caucasian languages. None of these theories hold up, but people think, oh, they must be related to something, right? I personally think, but I haven't, the person to ask is Carlos, who's sitting over there, if you want to bombard him with questions. I think that it's probably that we just don't have any written records of these languages, and we need them, that it was related to something that, some languages that just got replaced by European languages. Also, of course, my favorite, that it's related to Yupik Aleut, I put an Eskimo, Inuit. Another hypothesis that is much more recent, and I don't have an opinion on this one yet, Yaroslav Gorbachev and I will be teaching an advanced seminar to decide if this is true, is that Ket, which is the surviving Yeniseian language, I think I have another slide. Yeah, let's stay with this. The surviving Yeniseian language is related to Na-Dene. Now remember when we talked about the Inuit Yupik Aleut, they moved from this edge of Siberia over. This map is the way you're used to, but it doesn't actually show what the pattern is. To move from here over to Alaska is really far. Really, really far. So we don't know. We're going to look at the reconstructions, but to bring this a little bit home, the Na-Dene languages, Ket has 210 speakers, so we need the information about it. This hypothesis presupposes that there was a single family that split off this way with Yeniseian. Only Ket has survived. We have records of when these others disappeared. We get down to here, and here is our friend Navajo. So this would mean that the Ket in the middle of Siberia are distantly related to the Navajo. If it's true, it's a breathtaking discovery. So we're going to do a seminar this spring and try to figure out if it's true. Let's look at something that gets lost very, very quickly. And even before the language is lost, counting systems seem to be lost. Well, obviously, they're lost because where there's contact, the trade goes on in the language of the people coming in from the outside. So Spanish will replace the counting system. In Greenland, where I work, only the small numbers are in Greenlandic, the rest are in Danish. The higher numbers are all in Danish. So you would think that base 10 would be logical. You've got 10 fingers. I thought, as I was making this slide, I thought, maybe you don't think that because this country steadfastly refuses to go onto the metric system. So maybe you don't really like base 10. But it seems really good. You have 10 fingers, and you start counting. And if you look at, I put up Croatian because it's really transparent here. You have, say, three, you have 10. That's it. You want 30? 3, that's it. Right? You have 100. You slap 3 in front of it. 300. So this seems really basic, obvious. What else would you do? Turns out, you could do quite a lot. So there are base 5 systems. That makes sense too. You have one hand. Mayan languages use base 20. Okay, 10 hands, 10 fingers, 10 toes, right? But then things start to get weird when you look at it. So Aramba has its base, well, it's not base, the numbers are in a power of 6. Now, I haven't read the full description of this, and I would like it because I don't know how you would use a numerical system. And I thought, well, maybe it's me and my math, so I took it to my husband, who's a physicist. And we're sitting thinking, Why have these numbers? I can't for the life of me tell you why we have these numbers. And this is a good example of why you want to not just know what the words are, but you want to know how they're used. So here's something that may seem even more out there, but these are more common than you might think. Aksapman, which is spoken, 8,000 speakers in 1991 in Papua New Guinea. Papua New Guinea has a very, very high linguistic density. Lots of different languages. It has a body part counting system. So you start on the right hand at the thumb. That's 1. So it's not that, I'm not talking about counting 1, 2, 3. I'm saying thumb, right thumb means 1. Right index finger means 2. It's the same word, right? So you go here, you go around, you come up the elbow, eyes, nose, you go back down, you get base 27. So it's just a lot of body parts you're using, right? So you can see why it's difficult to do certain kinds of math in this, but you probably don't need to do, but this way the power of 6 makes no sense. So then when you use these systems, then you go back again, right? So what are we? 27, 28, 29, 30. 30 is left middle finger, go back around, right? And you crash and burn after a certain number. So the other thing is, suppose you think, okay, this makes sense. You can understand. You're like, 1, 2, 3, right? Then you find out, if you start looking in languages in Papua New Guinea, what you find is that where you rotate, so the fingers are really obvious, but after that, it's not clear. There's a lot of choice. So you don't have to go up to your nose. Some of them rotate right here in the collarbone. I don't know why. And if we didn't have records of this, you wouldn't believe me. You would think I really was talking about Martians, right? But people use this. So this is very interesting. I put the title of this book. Sorry. I'm going to stop doing it. If you want a good book written by a great linguist on some of these things, Nick Evans. I want to play around with sounds. Sound systems of the world's language vary greatly. Now I'm talking about the systems that make up the words. We have other sounds that we use all the time. So you can go pfft in English, but that's not part of a word ever, right? So they vary into how many vowels we have. Low of 2 in this sample of 564. The high of 14 vowels. Anybody want to guess? German. So, good language to know. Consonants. This is what varies very, very much. Rotokas, Papua New Guinea, small population. I don't know how many speakers. Had 4,300 in 1981. In Papua New Guinea, people live in isolated communities, so you get very different languages, but they're very small. Only 6 consonants. And then, my colleagues I can't pronounce this name of this language. A Khoisan language has 102 consonants. 102 different consonants. That's the Khoisan family is known for its clicks. Clicks are a very special part, a special kind of consonants, and they are not found in many language systems. So the geographic distribution of click languages is here. The click languages is Khoisan language. They've spread a bit to Bantu as borrowings, but we're going to take a look at a clip of Juansi, which I can't pronounce properly. It has 48 different clicks. These all make different words. They make up different meaning, just the way duh and s are different sounds in English, and you can change a word, or bad and bat, right? That t and d. These count. They count in the sound system. So we're going to look at a video clip. I found a great video clip on YouTube of a Juhansi speaker, and it's just listed as a San Bushman. So I couldn't tell what the language was, and I couldn't tell what he was saying. I knew he was clicking. So luckily, my friend Amanda Miller, who's at Ohio State, is an expert on click languages. And I said, could you take a look at this and see? She said, oh, it's Juhansi. I said, can you understand it? She sent me a full translation. Linguists are great. So we're going to look at this. It's going to take a minute to load. And this is just a clip. There's a much longer sequence on YouTube, and we'll see how we're doing with the sound. That's part of a much longer story. But you can hear it, right? Even in the sound system here. Okay, so he's Jauncey. So I just wanted to put in a little plug for some of the work I've been doing with some students. Going to a language that's spoken by a lot of people, Wolof. It has just under 4 million speakers in Senegal. West Africa's been a lot in the news. We didn't go here recently, it was a couple years ago. Here is Senegal. You saw that the click languages are spoken down here. But I went there going to Ronk, which is the village here. It's up here by Richard Toll, that's Mauritania. So I went there to visit my daughter, who was in the Peace Corps. And she was learning Wolof. Here she is. She does not, there, she's right there. She's in the Peace Corps for 2 years learning Wolof, and I heard clicks. And they aren't using the clicks in the sound system, but they're using them outside of the sound system as replacement vocabulary. I didn't give you videos of this, but you have a word like, the word for yes is wow, which in itself is great. You could say, wow, 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 right? You're meaning yes, yes, yes. It's fantastic. So wow, wow, wow. So, but you can also, you don't have to say wow, you can click. That means yes. And even at border control, I hand them something, they say, so that's not like teenage, come on, right? But we get that in English. But the thing that's really cool about Wolof, one of the many cool things about Wolof, is that there's not just a click for yes, that click has a few variants, but there's also one for no. No, sorry, is no. So yes, people do this all the time. And then there's a nice one that means I don't like. I need more water to do it. So anyways, two of our graduate students, Rebecca Baglini and Martina Martinovic, have been working on these clicks with me, and they also are working on their dissertations doing other things. They aren't studying these clicks. They leveraged some of the experience working with Wolof. They both got their own dissertation grants to do their own research in Senegal, thanks to this. And the other thing I want to point out, Rebecca here is sitting, these are Wolof's. Martina looks like she's in a really good place. She is. She's in Saint Louis, in the former French capital, and she's indoors recording someone in the quiet. Rebecca here is sitting at the fringe community in the Wolof village. They're Poulars, and they're a marginalized group within society. So every society has lots of marginalized groups, and well, we got to move on because I'm running out of time and I have so much more to tell you. So one kind of speech that is completely endangered is whistled speech. And I had to put this up. I don't work on it, but it's very interesting, and I thought you might not know about it. You need to know about it. Luckily, in particular, Mark Sicoli, a colleague of mine at Georgetown, has been very busily documenting it. And people whistle instead of speaking. And it's not just like, hey babe kind of whistle. I can't whistle, so I'm not going to do that. Or, however you would, a wolf whistle, that's what we call it. A wolf. It's not just a wolf whistle or just like pay attention whistle. They have whole conversations whistling. Typically, these are done where people are far apart and they need to talk long distance. So we'll have a clip from this. You should look at the full movie on YouTube. It is amazing. And the thing about this is, of course, I'm going so fast that I skipped over this. This whistle speech is used by a very small number of speakers, and that's pretty typical for whistled speech everywhere. But one of the things that is driving whistle speech endangerment is you don't need to whistle, right? Just the way, oh, there goes my clock. Okay, so we're going to listen to this clip, and he is whistling. The translation is given in Chinateco, and then the English. But the whistle is the whistle. So. So you might think this is Hollywood, and this is really a beautiful, beautiful footage. But I know linguists who have worked, and one guy stands here, a woman stands over here with the different speakers, and they translate. They can actually understand one another. They can understand one another. And I assume you can learn it too. I'll have to ask Mark. So now it's time to go to Greenland. We have been in hot climates, and one reason I work in Greenland is I don't like the heat, I like the cold. So we're going to go to Greenland and look at some of the things that go on there, and I just thought maybe you don't have the map of Greenland in your head too well. So this map, it's very faint. Here's the Arctic Circle. Can you see it? Here's the Arctic Circle right here. We're going to go up to Sisimiut, which is above the Arctic Circle. The main airport is Kangerlussuaq. The capital, Nuuk, is below the Arctic Circle, and we have some projects going there. And I've been working down here too, in Qaqortoq and down in here. All of these names have some kind of meaning in Greenlandic. In Kalaallisut, Qaqortoq, for example, means white. So we're going to go there. This is part of a big project, and I want to introduce the team. The team, these three people are from Okkasillerifik, the Greenland Language Secretariat, which is part of the government of Greenland. So one thing that's amazing about Greenland is that when their language was shifting, they realized they needed to do something. In 1979, they moved towards independence from Denmark and instituted home rule. And the guy who was really instrumental in this is Puyo. Puyo is my close collaborator. He's the head of the Greenland Language Secretariat, and he studied in Denmark. He studied at the University of Alaska, and he also studied at the University of Chicago. We have recordings that he made in our digital media archive, and Puyo taught my colleague Jerry Sadok Kalaallisut. So we are now working together on a large dictionary project, and these are two of the students that came to Greenland on this project. They were both undergraduates at the time. Perry is now in our graduate program in anthropology, and TJ is in a graduate program elsewhere. So we took them to Greenland, but I'm going to talk a little bit more about the work that I did this past summer with Hilary McMahon, who's a PhD student here, and Achliak Pitrusen, who is a student at the University of Greenland. We are in Sisimiut, and we're conducting fieldwork. So some of the recordings that you're going to hear are ones that we made this, well, they're all the ones that of this you're going to hear. I just wanted to point out, it looks like it's really hot because of the way they're dressed. We're staying in Puyo's house. Puyo is in Nuuk, and the sun is beaming in, so we're getting the baking effect. It's actually cold out. Hillary is here, it's the same day. She's wearing, you can't tell, she's wearing a down jacket. It's a lightweight down jacket, but this is July in Sisimiut. We're above the Arctic Circle. The sun doesn't set. And Puyo doesn't have curtains. We brought sleeping masks. So anyways, let's just talk a little bit about what I need to get through some of this. What is kind of neat, there's lots of things that are neat about Greenlandic, but it is known as a polysynthetic language, which means the words get very, very long. You keep putting things on, and you add suffixes, and you keep going as long as you want. The fact that you can keep going as long as you want is that question, that old sort of wives' tale, how many words for snow are there, is not a good question. That's because you can make as many words as you want. That's like saying, how many sentences do we have about snow in English? You can take a really long sentence and slap an and on and keep going, right? It's the limits of the human memory that stop that. So let's start with the root. Let's take achlu. Achlu. Can you see achlu? Can you tell what that is? Achlu is the word for a seal breathing hole. So you might not have thought about this, but the seals need to pop up to breathe. They're coming up through the sea ice, they pop up to breathe, and my scientist colleagues call this the McDonald's of the Arctic. Because if you're a polar bear, you like to eat seals. So you go find yourself achlu, and you wait. Pretty soon, dinner pops out, right? So achlu is extremely important in Inuit culture. So let's make a word. We have a word, achlu. We can add a suffix that means like. So if we build a word that means something that is like a seal breathing hole, it's a fishing hole. It looks like it. But think about what this tells you about the culture. The seal breathing hole is more salient, right? So let's just keep adding some more suffixes. You can add another one, lior, to make us. So we have achlualior. That's not a complete word. We got to put some person marking on there and tense. So we add the third person singular indicative. We have achlualior. Now, is that a word? How many words are up there? I don't know. This is why the word counting is problematic. But one of the things, I'll just skip to this. One of the things that Greenlanders like to do is play with you and make long words. And so when people saw I was recording, they say, oh, I know a really long word. Again, this is a little bit like me saying, I know a really long sentence. But it's in the culture, so people will sort of try to have these contests of making long words. My friend Eva Lou is going to say this for us. She says, I know a really long word, and I'll tell you what it means. And here it's broken up into all the suffixes. So there's like 20. Here she says, this is a very faint recording. Maybe turn the volume up. He's controlling it up there. So listen carefully. She doesn't say exactly what's written here. This is the written text that she gave me. If you listen, we'll listen again. So one way we know that this is a word is it's incomplete if you end too soon. And then the other thing is you can't stop and take a breath in the middle of it, right? Because you can't, I mean, if you do it, you can do that in English, but it sounds stupid, right? Same thing here. So then my friend Lena said, oh, I know a really long word. So she sent me a very similar word, and it's even longer. And you can see what she's doing. It's like sticking the ants on. She's just sticking the gook on, right? So once they were trying to make a communications company again. It's not an important word, but it's that it's long. So this long word is being passed around. So the other thing that Greenlanders like to do is tongue twisters. So let's play with this. They started when I knew I was looking for these language games. It's the slide I skipped over. But these are tongue twisters in Greenlandic. So we take the word tutu, and there is a rhythm depending on how the words are made here. And I'm not even going to try to do this. We're going to listen to Mikla. So here's Mikla. She's going to say it, and then she starts laughing too. So their language is so robust that when Greenlanders often, just sitting around the dinner table and playing jokes and things, they will do tongue twisters. So I want to go now to talk about Sami. And I skipped over a slide. I'm going to go back to it. I want to talk about one thing that linguists aren't very good about getting at, and something that really means a lot to people. And then we're going to go and look at some Sami resilience, and then I'll let you go. We are very good, and this I'm calling language practices. Maybe some of my colleagues will have a better term for this, but I mean a whole lot of things. So we are very good about recording traditional language. We are very good about getting prayers and traditional speeches. And once communities have lost their language, they want those texts. They want to know how to do those things. We're pretty good about getting verbal arts. We've got language games, songs. But people are also interested in what I'm calling the SpaghettiOs language. That's not the technical name. But what I mean is the things that you actually say all the time. So if you are part of American culture and a 7-year-old boy says to you, knock, knock, you can't say come in, right? There's only one appropriate response. And if you want to torture 7-year-old boys, which some of us do, this is being recorded, edit that out. I didn't really mean that. But if your 7-year-old nephew is driving you crazy and you want to drive him crazy back, you can pretend you don't know that's a joke, right? This is a really important part of culture. It's not high-level culture, but think about this. You learn a foreign language and you go to Paris. You think your French is great, and you see an older woman fall down in front of you. Well, you're not going to say, SpaghettiOs, obviously, but you want to say, are you okay? You want to say it the right way. So you're probably not losing sleep in the middle of the night at how to say, SpaghettiOs in French, but those are the kinds of things that people want to know because the language is alive. So let's go to a project about the Sami, where they are doing an awful lot to revitalize their languages. We saw, if you remember the picture of the Arctic, Sami was in that yellow Finno-Ugric languages. Sami is related to Finnish and Hungarian. Sami are also reindeer herders. And they are in Norway, Sweden, Finland, and Russia. There's different Sami languages. Some are more robustly spoken than others. They have a big project called Speak Sami to Me with Sami youth ambassadors. I met with them. They are amazing. These are teenagers, high school students, who spend their time using Sami on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Here they are, handing out Sami buttons and Sami bracelets. And they're trying to get young people to speak the language and use it. Because the future of any language is the youth. We need more speakers, right? We need those youth. A language is really endangered when children aren't speaking it. So they are out there working at it, and it's amazing. And these are in different Sami varieties. There's also buttons in Norwegian. So one particular part of Sami culture and Sami language is this yoiking. When you came in, that was a yoik, and I want to talk a little bit about yoiking and what it means to be culturally alive and have a vital language. Traditionally, the Sami yoik had no accompaniment whatsoever except Sami drums. It was very important in Sami shamanism, and it was not a performance art. Sami yoiked for themselves. It has a lot of elements of Sami traditional worldview: community, cooperation, closeness to nature, all of these things, perseverance. So there's a difference in Sami language and culture between singing and yoiking. And if you're with Sami, I don't know if anybody's ever spent some time with Sami, it's not uncommon for someone to say, let's have a yoik. And they yoik. They yoik in meetings, they yoik. It's lovely. I love yoiking. It was, as you can imagine, suppressed by Christian missionaries because it seemed really to be part of paganism. The suppression led into its decline, but it has become a central symbol of Sami Renaissance. So I'm going to play a clip. It's an audio clip of a traditional Sami yoik so you can hear what it sounds like. Very traditional. This is from an ethnomusicologist. So now let's look what's going on. So I was very lucky in August to be invited by the Sami Council to meet with them in Norway, and I got there for the 25th anniversary celebration of Sami University College. The first name there is the Sami name, and Kautokeino is the Norwegian name of the town. So they teach, all their instruction is in Sami. This also coincided with the 40th anniversary of the Sami Science, or the Research Center, and they invited Jon Henrik to come and yoik. Jon Henrik is Sami from Sweden, and he is a superstar. And he is a superstar because he won a contest. He won the contest that's called Sweden's Got Talent. And there's something else that's very interesting about Jon Henrik. I go back and look at, I don't know if you can see in this picture these Sami faces. Can you see these women? They're distantly related to Finns and Hungarians. That's what they look like, right? So Jon Henrik was adopted. This is public knowledge. He was adopted. He was born in Colombia. He was adopted by Swedish Sami, and he's a Sami reindeer herder. He speaks Swedish. I heard him speak Swedish, and I heard him speak Sami. And he's going to do a yoik. He has, since he won Sweden's Got Talent, he has become a superstar. And honestly, he's a very good-looking guy. And so when I was at Sami University College's anniversary, I was there as one of the guests. And all of the young women and many of the older women stood up to have their picture taken with Jon Henrik. And he's a very talented singer. He came on stage, so we had lots of local people yoiking. He came on stage with a keyboard, 2 accompanists, and I guess you'd call it a fog machine, right? Now think about what this means. Is this yoiking? It's not traditional yoiking. So how did the Sami feel? Honestly, every woman in the place would have married the guy in a heartbeat. He is a local hero. He's a Sami hero because there's been a lot of tension between Sami and the Swedes in Sweden. And when he won Sweden's Got Talent, people felt it was a huge vote in favor of Sami. And on top of it, it shows us an important thing about culture and people and languages. They aren't museum pieces. They're alive. They change. And this is what speakers want. They want their languages and cultures to be developing. So I'm just going to play a little clip of this. When you were coming in, you heard Jon Henrik. yoiking, but you didn't know what it was. And I want this against the background of having heard a traditional yoik. This isn't a traditional yoik at all. Remember, yoiking was not performance art. No accompaniment. Oh, sorry. It's got to reload. So this is just the beginning. This is all on YouTube. He's got an album out, which I tried to buy, but you have to get it from iTunes Norway. So I'll get it later this year. So here we go. This is the beginning. Yeah, you can see it doesn't look Colombian. It doesn't look Sami, right? I cut it off there because Martha doesn't want me to talk all afternoon. Isn't that amazing? And this raises such deep issues for us. What is language? What is culture? What is identity? Who are we? And he's been to Colombia. I don't know. I know they told me that he went to visit Colombia. I don't know if he speaks any Spanish. I would doubt it. He's a reindeer herder, and he's a terrific yoiker. And he's really a symbol of a lot of things to come. So, on that note, I want to close with an upbeat hope for the future of languages and cultures. These are three women. The two on the outside are Sakha Yakut women who speak a Turkic language, which is shifting, but it's not endangered. The woman in the middle is Edelman. Edelman is another isolate, and it is spoken maybe by 9 speakers. She's a second language learner. She's an amazing dancer, and she's getting a PhD right now at the University of Arizona. She's a fantastic, fantastic woman. She's working very hard to revitalize her language. So part of the story is resilience, and people really care. So thank you very much. Thank you for coming. Please enjoy the rest of the afternoon.